The food looks so good, but there are creatures lurking on the plate. Invisible dangers. For example, a simple hamburger cooked on a flat top. It did not reach 155 degrees, so E. coli bacteria, often found in raw hamburger, wasn't killed. In fact, it grew. E. coli causes cramps, diarrhea, kidney failure, even death. A few years ago, E. coli killed 6 people who ate undercooked hamburgers from a national chain. Consider this salad. The lettuce was chopped on this cutting board. A few minutes earlier, the board had been used for cutting raw chicken without being properly disinfected. So salmonella bacteria from the raw chicken moved from the cutting board to the lettuce. Salmonella causes fever, vomiting, and worse. And this chili made a lot of people sick. Here's how. After the chili was cooked in this large pot, it was placed in a cooler. But because the pot is so large, the chili took way too long to cool. Staphylococcus aureus began to grow inside the pot. The result? This chili created more than heartburn. Diners suffered vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps. In Soldotna, Alaska, 32 people also got sick from chili. But in this case, it was caused by a cook who had uncovered cuts and sores on his hands, and he was not wearing gloves while handling food. These are not stories we made up to scare you. We're telling you about real dangers, real sickness, real death, all because food was mishandled. Did you know there are more than 200 diseases transmitted through food? Each year in the United States, about 76 million people get sick from what they eat. These numbers include your family, friends, and neighbors. More than 300,000 are hospitalized, and as many as 5,000 Americans die every year from foodborne illness. But these deaths and illnesses can be prevented. You can stop dangerous bacteria by doing your job properly. It's a matter of life and death. If you work in food service here in Alaska, from dishwashing to cooking to serving, you must have a food worker card. Whether you're working on a cruise ship, in a resort, a restaurant, school, or nursing home, your community is depending on you to serve safe food. You've got to know the risk factors. What can make people sick? And what can you do to prevent foodborne illness where you work? We'll warn you, we're going to discuss things that make most people say, ugh. Yuck. But if you have the facts about germs and how they spread, even though some of the information is gross, we will all be much healthier. Now, let's start with one of the most important ways you can prevent foodborne illness: personal hygiene and hand washing. Do you want somebody sick or sneezing to prepare or serve your food? Yuck! Of course not. It may sound obvious, but if you're sick, stay home. The germs you bring to work will spread to forks, knives, pots, pans, food, co-workers, and customers. You should not work if your bowels are loose, if you're vomiting, if you have a cold, flu, a runny nose, or sore throat. You should not work with food if you have an infected cut, burn, or sore on your hand. If you have a cut or sore that's not infected, wash your hands, put on a clean Band-Aid, and wear gloves. Wash your hands frequently. This is the most important step you can take to keep from getting sick and to keep the people you serve from getting sick. Most of us catch colds by touching our mouth, nose, and eyes with hands that are contaminated by germs. But our hands also spread serious diseases, such as hepatitis A and infectious diarrhea, and your hands pick up germs everywhere when you touch countertops, doorknobs, raw foods, when you shake hands, cough, or sneeze. Speaking of sneezing, here's a big yuck. A sneeze sends at least 5,000 droplets into the air, droplets full of bacteria. If you cover your nose and mouth when you sneeze into your hand, that means 5,000 germ-filled drops fly into your hand at more than 100 miles an hour. That's why you need to wash your hands to get rid of those germs. Working with food, you'll wash your hands dozens of times during a shift. Wash your hands before you touch any food, before you put on gloves, and if changing gloves, wash before you put on a new pair. Wash your hands after you work with raw meat, fish, or poultry. These raw foods contain bacteria that are killed by cooking, but if you don't wash after touching raw meats and seafood, you will spread bacteria all around the kitchen. Always wash your hands after you handle trash or take out the garbage. After you go to the bathroom, very important. And yes, you need to wash even if you scratch your face, rub your eyes, touch your hair, or if you wipe or scratch your nose. Your nose, as you probably suspected, is a buffet of bacteria, loaded with lots of disease-causing germs, the stuff that causes strep or flu or other sicknesses. It may seem like all you do is wash your hands at work. Good. Your customers' good health depends on your good hygiene. What do you think? Is this proper hand washing? Well, he got his hands wet, but it's not going to stop the spread of germs. When you wash your hands, think of a birthday party.
Happy birthday to you.
Why a birthday? Well, if you sing the traditional American version of Happy Birthday to yourself twice while washing, that will take about 20 seconds, just the right amount of time to properly wash your hands.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jeff. Happy birthday to you.
Notice the steps this worker followed. Using a paper towel, he turned on the warm water. You don't need to add germs by touching the handle on the sink. Lather your hands with plenty of soap. That's when you start singing. Rub your hands briskly to loosen dirt. Lace your fingers together. Rub the back of your hands, your wrist, and upper arm as well. Use a brush to scrub under fingernails, where germs really like to hide. Then rinse your hands thoroughly. After drying your hands, turn the water knob off with the paper towel. And if you're washing your hands in a bathroom, this is important. Open the bathroom door using the paper towel. Otherwise, you're putting germs back on your hands by touching the doorknob. Which brings us to another big yuck. Did you know 30% of the people who use a restroom do not wash their hands?
Gross.
Big yuck. That means if you touch the bathroom doorknob after washing your hands, you've just come in contact with germs from other people's poop. Shigella is the most common bacteria spread from human waste. It can produce bloody diarrhea, fever, and cramps. In Washington and Oregon, Shigella in bean dip made more than 300 people sick, all because of poor hand washing by a food worker. So remember, wash thoroughly for 20 seconds. Then, like a doctor ready for surgery, be careful what you touch. Even if your hands are clean, do not touch ready-to-eat foods, such as salads or sandwiches, or even ice with your bare hands. After all, don't you feel better if you see someone making you a sandwich with gloves on? Using gloves correctly is just as important as hand washing. In fact, hand washing and gloves work together. When you need to change gloves, take the dirty pair off and throw them in the garbage. Then wash your hands correctly for 20 seconds and put on a new pair of gloves. Only put on new gloves after you've washed your hands. You will have to wash your hands and put on new gloves after going to the toilet, after touching raw meat, fish, or poultry, after sneezing or coughing, and after handling garbage. Again, every time you change gloves, you must wash your hands first before putting on new gloves. And don't fall into the trap of leaving gloves on too long. In sandwich shops and delis, be sure to take off gloves before touching scales or cash registers. The warm keypad on this scale will cause bacteria to grow from the meat or cheese you just sliced. So take off gloves before finalizing a sale. Then wash your hands and put on new gloves before handling food for the next order. It only takes about 30 seconds to use gloves correctly. And just think, those few seconds can make the difference between someone getting sick or staying healthy. In Anchorage, 190 people got sick after eating potato salad at a picnic. The worker who prepared the potato salad had diarrhea and used his bare hands to mix the potato salad. While wearing gloves is critically important, there are other germ barriers that keep ready-to-eat foods safe. Use tissue to handle bread and pastries or tacos, chopsticks to arrange food, and use scoops for ice. All of these barriers will keep the germs on our hands from going into customers' mouths. Again, here are the keys to good personal hygiene. If you're sick, stay home. If you have diarrhea, vomiting, sore throat, or a bad cold, do not come to work, even though you may not have a fever. Wash your hands often and properly, and use gloves, not your bare hands, to handle ready-to-eat foods. These are important steps in stopping the spread of germs. And when you stop germs, you prevent illnesses that can cause misery and even death, even for people you love.